Going here. So good morning or evening or afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for this Marine Technology Society webinar. I'm Jarrah Orphin and I'm an account executive at Sofar Ocean, working with research institutes and academia institutes. I'll be your moderator for this session today. And yeah, super excited to showcase the initiatives of Sofar Ocean and our collaborators in Australia on this MTS member webinar. We have Mike and Dan here today, and I'll intro them in a little bit. But for anyone that's not familiar with Sofar, we're an ocean tech startup based in San Francisco. I'm Australian, as you can hear, but I'm also here in San Francisco headquarters. So Sofar's mission is to connect the world's oceans to power a more sustainable future. But more concretely, we're scaling ocean data and information with modern technology. And we help researchers and scientists like Dan and Mike, as well as engineers and enthusiasts, go out and collect ocean data at scale at low cost and complexity. So before we dive in, some logistics, I want to just kick things off with a brief overview of GoToWebinar. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. If you have any technical questions for us or questions for the presenters, kindly type them into the chat box on the right there. You'll see a little questions box. We'll promptly address them or relay them to the presenters to address at the end of the presentation where we have a Q&A. So today's presentation is entitled Building Australia's National Network of Sofar Spotter Buoys to Unlock Real-Time Coastal Data at Scale. We have Dr. Michael Cuttler and Daniel Ierodiaconou, who have joined us from Australia today. So Mike is a research fellow at University of Western Australia. He's a facility leader for Australia's Integrated Marine Observing System, or IMOS, National Coastal Wave Buoy Facility, and an Australian Research Council Early Career Industry Fellow at University of Western Australia's Ocean Graduate School and Oceans Institute. His research focuses on understanding the physical processes driving changes in coastal morphology over a range of time and space scales. Through his role at IMOS's Coastal Wave Buoy Facility, he's leading the establishment of the National Wave Buoy Network, which will deliver nearshore wave and temperature observations at sites spanning Australia's extensive coastline. Dan is an associate professor at Deakin University. He's an experienced marine ecologist and associate professor in marine science at Deakin in Australia. He employs multidisciplinary approaches to improve our understanding of terrestrial and coastal processes, evaluation of marine reserves, and improve marine ecosystem-based management. He's the Victorian node leader for the Integrated Marine Observing System, or IMOS, board director for the Great Ocean Road Coast and Parks Authority, and is a coastal lead scientist for the Coast RI initiative to establish Australia's Coastal Observatory. All right, let's kick it off with the webinar. Dan, you want to take it away?
Thanks, Joe, and thank you for the kind introduction. Just on behalf of myself and Michael and also our Integrated Marine Observing System community, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians and elders of the land and sea on which we are able to observe and recognise their unique connection to land and sea country. And I'd like to pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples past and present. And I'm calling in from southwest Victoria down the southern part of Australia on the lands of the Eastern Maar people. So thanks, Jarrah. And today we're going to talk about establishing Australia's Coastal Wave Buoy Network. But first, I thought I'd give a bit of an introduction to the Integrated Marine Observing System and also this new initiative, this Coastal Research Infrastructure Initiative that the Integrated Marine Observing System is coordinating on behalf of 13 national collaborative research infrastructure strategy capabilities. So for those that don't know much about IMOS, IMOS was established in 2006, and it really is the backbone of Australia's integrated marine observing system. That's what we do. We run a number of different facilities, all focused on measuring different aspects of our marine system, from biogeochemical sampling to physical properties using fixed moorings and ships of opportunity, to movements of animal communities, such as what we're able to do with our acoustic telemetry networks. We also fill a really important gap in our region that contributes to our international observing system efforts. So critical infrastructure that's been in place for sustained observing, and most importantly, open data that's curated, QA/QC'd and provided for free to the public, to industry, to try and help us make more informed decisions on how we manage our coast. And you can see there the Coastal Wave Buoy facility. That's one of our new facilities that Mike is leading, and it's part of an initiative known as the Coastal Research Infrastructure Initiative that is really calling IMOS to help coordinate into the coastal zone. And this is really driven from the needs of our stakeholders, our rights holders, our state, federal and local government, and some of the issues that we're seeing in our coastal zone, from coastal erosion to biodiversity loss. So it's not IMOS. IMOS is one of the 13 partners that are driving this. IMOS is playing a leadership role in the coordination, but really what we're trying to do is bring together our national capabilities, our national research capabilities across land and sea interface to really try and meet some of the needs of our observing needs to inform research, but also inform industry moving forward, and also planning for our coastal communities. So look, you know, we're seeing unprecedented changes in our environment. If we look at our state of environment reporting, we're seeing trends in deteriorating environment, climate change threats to our native ecosystems. At the national level in Australia, we're not that well coordinated in terms of how we manage and monitor our coastal ecosystems. And this environmental decline is obviously an impact for our biodiversity, but it's also impacting human well-being as well. Most of our population centres, our industries, our activities are occurring in the coastal zone, and we're seeing increased pressures from population size and as these coastal communities grow. Our coastal zone is also incredibly important to our blue economy, and it's expected to surpass over 100 billion in 2025. And the reality is that we need more information. We need more data and information to prepare for future environmental change and to inform our decision-making processes and facilitate the sustainable use in our coastal regions. Australia really is a seaside country. Most of our population is actually living on the coast. So a lot of our infrastructure is right there on the coast. Over 50% of Australians live within 7 kilometres of the coast. So, you know, we really need more information to understand and prepare for changes in our climate. It's also complex because there's a broad number of users that need coastal data. So the idea is trying to get these national collaborative research infrastructure capabilities together to come up and formulate a plan, a national coastal research infrastructure plan to address these issues. And what we're really driving here is a step change in our ability to observe and model what's happening in our coast to inform future planning. So our vision really is infrastructure connecting land and sea to gather comprehensive and integrated scientific data from diverse sources to better understand, predict and address the opportunities and imminent risks facing Australia's coast for all our peoples. So we're very much in the design phase. We're currently doing extensive stakeholder engagement to really understand the priorities that are coming through from our stakeholders, our rights holders, and all levels of government. So through this process, we're identifying existing programs, identifying information gaps, and identifying opportunities for partnership or leveraging of existing activities. Our mandate that our activities will be broad national scale and have multiple end users of our data. And also it will leverage the capabilities of our existing national collaborative research infrastructure, such as IMOS, where we have had substantial investment in the past. And it's all about integration. I think here, it's not a marine problem, it's not a terrestrial problem, it's a combination problem, right? So we really need these different capabilities, and you can see the capabilities on the left-hand side there. We've got the terrestrial environmental research network, we've got the national computing infrastructure strategy, we've got AusScope that really deals with Earth systems and GNSS and many others that we can leverage to really try and address the needs in the coastal zone. So part of that engagement has been a lot of consultation, and I'm just going to present some of the results from this survey, and hopefully this will give some context in terms of where we're looking to invest into the future, including the Coastal Wave Buoy network that's currently underway that Mike will talk about shortly. So from our extensive consultation, these are the things that have come up as the most pressing issues. Things like coastal change, erosion, inundation, habitat loss, deteriorating marine water quality, and human use and exploitation. You can also see there what are the most important observation information needs that have been identified. Number one was bathymetry, and we've got waves, currents, sea level rise, habitat health, marine water quality, and water temperature. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to try and address all of these. So for example, if we look at bathymetry, there's already a coordinated national program dealing with bathymetry through AusSeabed and our national collaborators and also state government. So we're really focusing on where we can invest at the national scale to make a step change in our observation and modelling needs. So through the consultation process, these are probably the ones that have come to the surface the most. One, collection and aggregation of tide data. You know, we can't access tide data, and I'll talk a little bit more about this shortly. You know, we don't have that information at our fingertips. It's definitely not machine readable and ready for our national tide information that is available. We need better data on water level and water quality within estuaries. Estuaries, you know, we have a lot of built up infrastructure in our estuarine systems. These are obviously subject to storm surge and erosion, and we really need more information in these systems to make more informed decisions. Coupling water level and land motion is critical for us to understand the signal of sea level rise separate to our land deformation processes. And one thing that's come through is the need for high resolution real-time data streams for forecasting and prediction. So our consultation is very much ongoing, but these are the themes that are really rising to the surface. So if we think about sea level data, you know, there's a whole lot of reasons why we need sea level data, whether it be understanding sea level change in ocean circulation, coastal protection from events such as storm surge, providing flood warning and monitoring tsunamis, operational use in ports, fishermen and for recreation. And also, you know, defining our datums. In Australia, there's a lot of working on our AusHydroid that's trying to connect our land and sea datums. And those errors in our modelling and separation of our datums can propagate into things like sea level rise monitoring, modelling into our future forecasting as well. So it is a high priority. So, and this is a process that we're going through for all the types of capabilities and observing needs. And here's a bit of a plot of our distribution of tide stations around Australia. As I said before, you know, we can't access these in a single depository. There's different levels of data QA, QC, different levelling requirements that are undertaken nationally. So we really want to bring this data to the forefront and be able to provide accessibility not only to the research community but to industry as well, that would like to use this information to inform a range of different things such as coastal hazard assessments. So we're working with groups like the Australian Climate Service. In this example, they've developed the hydrodynamic wave Schism model, unstructured grid, and a 40-year hindcast and future climate simulations of sea levels and waves. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example actually for waves, significant wave height, correlation analysis that really is helping us to understand the uncertainty in our existing observation network that you can see on the top right-hand corner, and where those correlations are sort of falling apart. And that can actually help us identify where we need to put more observation infrastructure to close those gaps. So it forms part of the decision-making process in terms of where we put new infrastructure. So as a bit of a summary, in terms of the Coastal Research Infrastructure Initiative, this is what we're looking at doing. We can see on the left-hand side, observation and modelling needs, focusing on coastal erosion, inundation, coastal water quality and estuarine water quality. Just those that involve observation needs such as habitat health, condition and cover, biodiversity measurements, information on human settlements and community wellbeing, including health outcomes. And First Nations are a critical part in all of this. So we're going to be working on land and sea country, and we feel that this is an enormous opportunity for our First Nations to build capability and capacity and directly drive some of our observation needs moving forward. And data is so much of a piece in this piece of work. Data stewardship, from aggregating data to developing standards, from integration across spheres, security and access, understanding care and fair principles in terms of data needs, and also computing needs will be critical for our success moving forward. I won't go too much into the investment strategy, but yeah, we need to see a clear uptake for use and create impact. We're really driving for step change, and we see Coastal RI as sort of a centre hub to bring capabilities, not just within the NCRIS groups that I mentioned before, but also some of the bigger programs in Australia, such as the Digital Earth work that's done by Geosciences Australia and AusSeabed that's coordinating our seabed mapping capabilities. One of my last slides is about some of the no regrets funding. So whilst we're doing all this consultation, each one of these NCRIS capabilities has funding to move forward and to implement works immediately. So AusScope, they're funding a whole lot of work in drones to look at coastal erosion biodiversity assessments and fixed cameras on our coastlines. Turn are investing in surface elevation tables to look at changes in our sedimentation rates and how our habitats are keeping up, our salt marsh and mangroves are keeping up with that. And IMOS are investing in coastal wave observing and coastal moorings, and Mike's going to talk about the coastal waves right now. So over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and thanks for the introduction earlier, Jarrah. I'm Mike Cuttler, obviously the facility manager for the new IMOS Coastal Wave Buoy facility. With the time we've got left, I thought I'd just give a bit of an overview of some of the developments in Australia that have really led to the establishment of this facility, which Dan has touched on, and then give some details of where we're at and the current plans for the rollout of this national network of spotter buoys. You can jump, Dan. Yeah, Dan's just controlling the slides, so we'll work it out as we go. So yeah, this is another rehash of that slide Dan showed earlier, just with the wave buoys sort of circled and highlighted. I really like this as we're one of the new facilities, and I think shows where we fit into the pre-existing IMOS structure, particularly in that cross-shore sense. So we're really kind of focusing on that near-shore wave observations. And I also wanted to highlight here how all of the IMOS facilities are really anchored by that Australian Ocean Data Network, which is really the data hub of IMOS and is where all the observations that we collect gets curated and stored and made publicly available. And I'll talk a bit more about that as I talk through the wave observations. Next one. So I'd say over the last decade or so, there's been an increasing recognition of the need for coastal observations and nationally coordinated coastal observations, with waves being a real key priority for these. This has come out of various national plans and nationally coordinated surveys, as well as key stakeholder questionnaires. And then, as Dan's highlighted, this Coast RI consultation process more recently has really flagged the need for nearshore observations, with waves being a key priority. Next one, Dan. And so we're not starting from nothing. There's been historically a lot of wave observations collected around Australia. These have been collected by both state and federal agencies. This is just a screen grab from AODN's National Wave Archive. These sites that you can see here are generally sustained for the long term. So I think there's some sites in Queensland going all the way back to the early 70s. And these are really more focused on sort of your intermediate to deep water depths. So let's say something like 50 to 100 meters. So capturing that regional wave climate for these areas. And they've really focused on large format wave buoys. So typically you're like data well Mark III, Mark IVs, or your tri-axis buoys. So some of your classic wave buoys. But if we jump to the next slide, increasingly over the last few years, with the advent of spotters in particular, you've seen this push and pop up of more other observing networks. Some of these are filling gaps where there weren't existing observations. So some of the work Dan's been doing in Victoria, there was a big gap in the previous observations. And so with these lower cost and more cost-effective wave buoy observations, you've seen these university-led networks really pop up. These have predominantly been deployed in nearshore regions, again, where there's a bit of a gap in the observations. They were primarily driven by research needs, so areas where we didn't have wave observations but needed them to answer some of the questions we were chasing. But once we started putting these out, I think we all realized that there was a huge amount of uptake from both recreational users, industry uptake, and then the wider science community. Some of that was facilitated by these new platforms we developed, which are just these websites that promote really interactive display of the wave data, and then also make it publicly available as well. Jump to the next one, Dan. Simultaneously, as we were developing these, there was a push within the community here in Australia to really validate the use of spotters in particular against the more classic wave buoys. So this was an IMOS project funded through their new technology proving program that we led out of here at UWA in partnership with Dan and Ian Young as well in Melbourne. So we tested spotters against data wells and tri-axis buoys across a range of tidal and wave regimes around Australia. You can see the 4 test sites that we had, and you can see that they spread, east and west coast, as well as up to the Northern Territory. Importantly, for these comparisons, we actually developed protocols for calculating wave parameters directly from the displacements of both types of wave buoys, so working from the rawest format all the way through the processing. And ultimately through this, we were able to establish nationally consistent QA/QC protocols, optimize the mooring designs, and demonstrate the survivability of these. So really the fundamentals for anchoring a national network using this type of observing equipment. Additionally, you can collect all the data, but you really need to have standards established for how that data gets treated, how it gets stored. These were projects led by the AODN through the ARDC, which is the Australian Research Data Commons. So in 2018, they had a first effort to pull together all the data in those regional networks, so the state-run observations, and they pulled that into the National Wave Buoy Archive. And then over the last 2 years, we established metadata standards and QA/QC standards, which pulled in all of our university data as well, produced this national guideline for wave buoy observations, which is a publicly available best practice guidelines. And so this really provided the foundation between the data standards and the validity of the observations to bring forward the new coastal wave buoy facility. Next one, Dan. And so this is just an overview of how the facility is organized at the moment. We've got a steering committee on top that combines leaders in wave observations from all around Australia, as well as IMOS, to provide guidance on where we should be collecting these, how we should be collecting these, and really provide guidance to the central facility, which is here at UWA. So that's led by myself and a data officer that's coming on board. And we're sort of leading the coordination of all the data collection and curation. And then we've got our regional partners, which you can just see some of the logos there, but it's a lot of the folks that are already collecting these observations in nearshore waters. And so these are really the groups that are the boots on the ground and will be rolling out and deploying the spotters for us. All that data will be piped back to the central facility where we'll be applying QA/QC in real time and from the memory cards, and all the data will be available, as I mentioned, on AODN, as well as we're hoping to establish a nationally coordinated website to hold all of this data as well. Next one. And so right now we're looking at establishing 21 new sites around Australia. So you can see the colored dots in both of those plots just show where these new sites are going to be. I've also plotted them on top of the existing regional network, so you can see how we're trying to complement and add value where there are gaps, or in areas where there are offshore observations, trying to link in and provide that nearshore observation. Some of this targeted at really trying to meet that offshore to onshore observation, and some of these are even aligned specifically with where we have, beach observations looking at coastal erosion, so leading towards that sort of coast RI perspective that Dan's really talked about. At the moment, nothing is officially in the water, but we're looking at having our first lot of deployments roll out sort of the last quarter of this year, so it's somewhere between September to December. So hopefully we'll have some buoys in the water pretty soon. You can go next, Dan. The next few slides are pretty much just about where to find the data and how the data is coming in, which I can rip through, just wary of time. But if you navigate your way to the Australian Ocean Data Network, you can usually just Google AODN. You can play around with the search functions and look for the wave buoy observations. You'll find the near real time and the delayed mode. So this is all pre-existing data, but it's where our data will be feeding directly into. We're aiming to use cellular wherever we can, but we'll always fall back on Iridium. All the national sites, we're targeting to have full spectral data available, so that will also be available in real time, which will hopefully advance some research and modeling capabilities as well. Next one. This is just an example of what sort of this national end-user friendly website could look like. There's some examples right now you can go to for a look at this on WA Waves, SA Waves, or Vic Waves. So yeah, this is potentially what we're looking at for sort of a near real-time display. I think there's just one more slide on delayed mode. Again, this is more rigorous QA/QC applied from the displacements that we collect on the memory cards. We're following sort of the international Cortod standards for our QA/QC protocols, and then everything's produced to NetCDF and available again on the Wave Buoy archive on AODN. The last one's just acknowledgements of IMOS, NCRIS, and the steering committee for helping us to get as far as we can. And yeah, sorry, I think we're pretty tight on time about Jarrah, but yeah, take any questions that the community might have.
Awesome, thanks guys, that was fascinating. I think we've probably got time for one, maybe two questions. So I'll rip away with one from before the webinar. What has been your biggest pain point that hinders you from getting the most value out of the real-time wave data, either existing or what you could see in the over the next year?
The biggest pain point previously was the cost of Iridium. And I think with the advent of the cellular options, we've always wanted as much spectral data in real time as we can. And now we're actually getting it for the vast majority of our buoys, which is great. It's going to be a bit of a balancing act with the national sites, just given cellular coverage around Australia. But yeah, I think it'll be great for the ones that are in cellular to really be piping that in real time.
Awesome. And maybe one quick one that came through live from Sebastian, who used to work at Sofar. He's asking, are you looking to work with sort of local and remote coastal communities to sort of take ownership of the buoys, or is it more centrally managed that they will benefit from the data? An example here is backyard buoys.
Yeah, a bit of both, Sebastian. And Dan, I'll let you jump in as well. So we've got our regional teams that are really coordinating with locals on the ground as well. In WA, for example, we've been trying to coordinate with some of our national park services who have traditional owner rangers as well, that we're trying to incorporate into the deployment and maintenance of the national sites in the marine parks. So yeah, we're definitely making efforts to sort of coordinate with locals on the ground as best we can.
Yeah, look,
just
to back that up, Mike, obviously, you know, the communities that are in these places where we have priorities are often the ones that can do this type of servicing most efficiently. So we're actually dedicating funds through the Coast RI process to traditional owner communities, specifically to build up that capability and capacity and to help us meet the national observing needs.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks everyone for joining us, Mike and Dan. That was really interesting, learning about Australia's National Buoy Network. If we didn't get to your question, please reach out to me or anyone at Sofar or the guys here who did the presentation. We'll also send the recording over. You can watch it again and share it around, and it will be posted on our website. So I think that wraps it up. Any final words?
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us.